Welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast, hosted and sponsored by GrandTheftWorld.com. Tonight, we're going to get into a lot of news stories. Lots happened in the past week. We had the State of Disunion speech by former Vice President Joseph Biden.
We're cutting off Russia's largest banks from the international financial system, preventing Russia's central bank from defending the Russian ruble. We spent months building coalitions of other freedom-loving nations in Europe and the Americas, from America to the Asian and African continents. And the cost, the threats to the America and America to the world keeps rising. Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people. He'll never extinguish their love of freedom. He met with a wall of strength he never anticipated or imagined, and a pound of Ukrainian people, the proud people, pound for pound, ready to fight with every inch of energy they have. I call it building a better America. Because you can't build a wall high enough to keep out a vaccine. The vaccine can stop the spread of these diseases. Because I know there's simply nothing beyond our capacity to compete for the jobs of the future. We also need a level playing field that they later chose to patrol as police officers. Back to more normal routines. I can't promise a new variant won't come, but I can promise you we'll do everything within our power to be ready if it does. Third, ban assault weapons with high-capacity magazines hold up to 100 rounds. You think the deer are wearing Kevlar vests and make our forces more safer and be able to wage war with more clarity? We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. This is our moment to meet and overcome the challenges of our time, and we will, as one people, one America, the United States of America. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you. Go get him.
What we're getting with Joe Biden is great value MAGA. He said he wanted to secure the borders, that he was a capitalist, he wanted to fund the cops. And I got to tell you, it's as disingenuous as they come. They know their polls are tanking, so I'll show you their polls among independent voters. They're desperate to win them back, and it's not going to work. With that being said, we'll get into all that. The most important part of the night in terms of Joe Biden screwing up was when he referred to Ukrainians as Iranians. I'm not kidding. And I'll tell you why this is one of the most dangerous things he could have said. There was a moment where Joe Biden was speaking, I think it was at the G7, and he was talking about Syria, we think, and he kept saying Libya. Now, the problem is, if we as the American people or NATO or the G7 nations or the UN have to guess what we think Joe Biden is talking about when he refers to large countries and millions of people, eventually someone's going to get hurt. So I'll tell you, when Joe Biden was saying Libya over and over again, and the media was like, he meant to say Syria, you don't know that. You don't know that. And if the president says Libya, who are you to decide what he really said? And that's what's happening. So maybe Joe Biden literally meant to say Iranians. And we're just going like, oh, silly Joe, he gaffed again.
Burn pits became real popular after the State of the Union, aforementioned. There was a part where the Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, I believe she is, she got up and she was cheering real hard for some burn pits. So I was confused about that.
And our troops in Iraq have faced in Afghanistan have faced many dangers.
Yeah, they did.
One being stationed at bases breathing in toxic smoke from burn pits.
Why is she clapping for that? What the what? What is this?
What is that?
Did you see that shit? Nancy Pelosi goes, yeah,
because
they have black lung. The waste of war.
We had Russia getting canceled. Putin got canceled in the past week. That's got to hurt.
We're talking about the censorship that's surrounding Ukraine and Russia, which is crazy that this is happening, but it's happening, right? Now, remember, if you watch our other videos, you know that this is a situation that was instigated very much largely by NATO and the United States and Joe Biden. And there was a coup, and no one ever talks about that. There's been less. So there's a lot of stuff. And so now here is the censorship that's happening. Social media companies ban Russian news RT in Europe. Remember, it's only censorship if it's done through the government. So when a corporation the size of a small government does it, I like to call it freedom ship. That's what I. It's kind of like how it's not torture if we outsource it to a country that allows torture, or as I call it, freedom therapy. Okay. Twitter is labeling links to Russian state media. So that's happening. Hey, how do they determine who is linked to Russia? I hope they consult with experts like, Rachel Maddow and Keith Olbermann, stuff like that. Here's another one. Visa and MasterCard have banned Russian banks as more Western sanctions roll out. So what is the result of that? Well, the result of that is people's lives are turned into misery in Russia. Regular people, they can't get on the train now. So the headline here is Apple Pay and Google Pay no longer work on Moscow's metro system, leading to long lines as people fumble about for cash. Munich Philharmonic sacks their conductor Valery Gergiev over failure to denounce Putin. The move leaves classical star isolated after he was dropped by his management over his refusal to end support for a criminal regime. I think Dennis Rodman got less shit for hanging out with Kim Jong-un than this guy does. Right? Isn't that wild?
We've got a lot of psychological warfare going out there in the past couple of weeks about this whole Russia-Ukraine conflict. We've got New World Next Week's James Corbett and James Evan Pilato breaking that down.
7 fake news stories coming out of Ukraine. Less than now 2 weeks. A lot happens when we take a week off, James. Less than 2 weeks into Russia's military operation in Ukraine, and the propaganda cogs are whirring as fast as lightning, churning out news, opinion, and of course just content grist for the media mill. Dozens of stories, images, narratives, and videos have circulated as being taken from the fighting in Ukraine, a huge percentage of which are fake. Some of it, of course, and this is why I think the sort of the fog of war, it's the perfect who knows what's going, which is why it's, I think, smart. I was talking about a friend with this. Maybe it's smart for folks like us to maybe not wade headlong into this when we know very next to nothing about what's actually going on. But, of course, some of it could be misunderstandings, mistaken identity, misattribution, but many are most likely deliberate deceptions designed to provoke a response. The real action is in the reaction, as they say. I'll briefly do the hit list, and James, you can kind of hone in on your favorite lowlights. Number 1, the ghost of Kiev. It was reported that a single Ukrainian plane was patrolling the skies above Kiev. The English press called the unnamed pilot the ghost of Kiev and claimed he had downed 6 Russian jets in air-to-air combat less than 2 days. No evidence any of this happened at all. Newsweek themselves, quote, there is zero evidence the ghost of Kiev exists. Number 2, pretty similar. Russian planes flying over Kiev. A lot of people sharing a short video of Russian planes allegedly flying low over the city of Kiev. The Times used it as a still in their story. Will sanctions stop a Russian shell? The problem is it's not Kiev, it's Moscow. It's 2 years ago, and it's footage what is likely probably rehearsal for their 2020 victory parade flyovers. Number 3, Zelensky visiting the troops. Possibly no politician in history has had a PR makeover quite as fast as Vladimir Zelensky. James, did he play Hava Nagila with his genitals on a show? Okay, just double checking. Last week, just some guy. This week, he is a war hero. Twitter filled with people sharing photos of him in combat fatigues, but the problem is that photo is almost a year old when he actually did visit the troops last April 2021. Number 4, Luhansk power station explosion. Early on, this video went viral. Major news networks used it, all claiming it shows a power station in Luhansk exploding after being hit with Russian missiles. It does not. It's a chemical plant exploding in China in 2015. Number 5, video games again. More footage claiming to show Ukrainian ground forces downing Russian aircraft, even appearing on Spanish news. It's from a video game called Arma 3. That's a pretty good one. Number 6, Russian warship, go F yourself. Allegedly leaked audio has Ukrainian border guards communicating with a Russian warship being told to surrender. And the guards say, Russian warship, go F yourself. Western press reported, of course, all 13 immediately murdered. However, Russia reports they weren't murdered. They were taken alive. They were unharmed and sent back to the mainland, a story both the Ukrainian government and the press have had to admit is probably true. Number 7 on the list, Syrian drone strikes footage, another video doing the rounds, and again shared by official Ukrainian accounts. Drone footage supposedly showing the destruction of a column of Russian vehicles. It's footage of a Turkish drone strike in Syria from 2020. Sidebar, I learned this from our buddy, Last American Vagabond. Israel's using this, of course, as cover to bomb Syria while nobody's looking, of course, since Trump isn't around at the moment to bomb Syria for them. Meanwhile, other accounts sharing footage of combat from Libya or Israeli bombardments of Gaza under the hashtag Stand With Ukraine. And it is a horrible, sick kind of irony that so many of the clips prompting outrage in Western liberals actually come from wars their government started. Oh, wait, that's Obama's Libyan slave markets you're sharing pictures of, not Ukraine. James, I like the picture of the flaming chaos and violence that says this is Russia bombing Ukraine. Just kidding. It's a peaceful protest in a Democrat city.
Adidas pulled their contract, and now people needing Russian tracksuits over there are just in want, and having to go to secondhand markets to get them and black markets to get their stripes. And we got a couple other things. We had a Pfizer document dump this past week. It was pretty sizable. There's some other news on the Pfizer front, things people are finding out now that they wish they would have known maybe back then when they were making important life-changing decisions about their genetics.
And just to remind the viewers before we set up this story, this is a Bloomberg article he wrote, Aaron Siri wrote, why a judge ordered FDA to release COVID-19 vaccine data pronto. He's been involved in a case to try to get the FDA to release its vaccine data that it's had from Pfizer. All the information Pfizer has given them. We've covered this in the show before. Here's another article. This is out of Reuters. Wait, what? FDA wants 55 years to process FOIA requests over vaccine data. So they drug their feet. We covered this as well. They wanted 55 years to make all of this stuff public. And then all of a sudden they lost this case. And this is what the headline looked like from Reuters. Paramount importance, judge orders FDA to hasten release of Pfizer vaccine docs. FDA wanted 500 pages a month, which was about 76 years they would have done this. The judge said, we want this out in 55,000 pages a month. Right. And that's where we're at right now. The first dump just happened March 1st. So to set this up, ICANN's website has posted all of these documents from the Pfizer dump, and it will continue to do so. You can go to I Can Decide. Right there, Pfizer documents from the FDA. You click on that. You can go to the Pfizer documents box. And right there, you have 6 pages so far of all the Pfizer documents you can download. You can go through those. You can post. Please do. This is for the citizen journalists out there that want to look at all of these documents and do whatever they want with those.
And then we've also got...
So I've been going over the Bilderberg notes, including the meeting list, for the past several days now. I cover it every year, and I have since 2006, so that's 12 years now. And I've never seen a Bilderberg meeting quite like this one. This is probably going to prove to be unprecedented. Certainly, I haven't seen a meeting like it anytime recently in the past several decades. A huge convergence of very high officials, and clearly an agenda which is either a push for war or the build-up to something very big on the geopolitical stage.
Because there's 3 tracks that are going on at this Bilderberg. And one track has to do with quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and tech. The other track has to do with populism, the economy, and a world where work is going to be supplanted by technology. Those 2 things are there. But the third thing has to do specifically with Russia as a topic, Saudi Arabia and Iran as a topic together, and then U.S. world leadership. Okay? But that's not the only thing that's going on. In something that, and I went back and looked, you guys, I went back and looked every year back down through the late 90s, and I have not seen this happen before. So it may have happened before, but it hasn't happened in at least the last 20 years. This year's Bilderberg meeting, which is being held June 7th through 10th in Turin, Italy, also happens to fall on both days of the G7. That's the group of 7 meeting that brings together the leaders of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the United States, with both the president of the European Commission and the president of the European Council, both of the European Union, all together in the same room. Both days of that, but also it's going to fall on both days of a NATO defense ministers meeting. So in other words, what I'm saying is for one day, the meetings of Bilderberg, the NATO defense ministers, and the G7 will all be on the same exact day. Something that has not happened in at least 2 decades. And for the record, I stopped looking after 2 decades, so it could be even longer. But not only that, okay, but this particular NATO defense ministers meeting, which will be June 7th and 8th, the first 2 days of Bilderberg, being held in Brussels, by the way, an hour-and-a-half flight away from where the Bilderberg group is meeting, is also supposed to be focused on Russia. In addition to a brand new announcement that NATO is set to unveil a new plan to reinforce their presence in Europe in the event of any crisis, with the deployment of 30 troop battalions, 30 squadrons of aircraft, and 30 warships within 30 days after this meeting. And the NATO meeting is going to be chaired by NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, or is that Jens Stoltenberg? I'm probably saying it wrong, who is also on the Bilderberg attendees list. So in other words, it's basically as if the NATO defense ministers, all of them, will also be attending Bilderberg because the guy chairing their meeting is going to go from there to Bilderberg. And really the same could be said for the G7 meeting, because how hard is it to make a conference call? And what I'm telling you is that is the first time that that has happened in at least 20 years. But this is unprecedented that this is happening. Not to mention, as Aaron looked into it, how many high-level governments are being represented at this year's Bilderberg. There's usually a lot of government people, that's absolutely true. But this is pervasive. This is most of Europe. And we've talked about this with you guys in previous videos we've done on smart cities, such as Magdar and other projects. And the future they're talking about, there will be literally no privacy. You will have a digital footprint follow you everywhere you go. Your digital doppelganger will become a part of you that follows you everywhere. You will have sensors in your trash that basically can tell whether or not you recycled. I mean, these are the kinds of things they're talking about. It's a little mind-blowing once you start looking into it. It's a lot more than just having Alexa units, turn your lights off and on and make sure you're not using too much air conditioning. It's a world where your every step in physical reality will have a digital trace on it.
And on the other side of that is the little country of Estonia, the Baltic country on the far eastern side of Eastern Europe, right on the Russian border, the forgettable little country with 1.3 million people. Well, its Prime Minister Yuri Ratas is in attendance this year at Bilderberg, and it's not just because there are unprecedented NATO exercises taking place on the Russian border, specifically in the Baltic countries of Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. It's not just because of that or because of the troop surge that is going on there on the 100th year anniversary of their original independence. It's also because Estonia is actually about to become better known as Estonia. It is a live experiment with a small country population in complete participation, an experiment, a live social experiment about how we're going to live next. They are doing it. Your digital life is about to become inseparable from your actual physical life.
It's actually a plastic card, have my unique identification number on it and also chip.
Key to it all? One card. It's a digital ID with encrypted files used together with a PIN code. 94% of Estonians have a digital ID like this one.
They have already tied their mandatory national ID card not only to your personal ID and your national ID number, but to the encryption keys that protect that identity online, and to all your transactions and records for banking and healthcare. And it's also going to institute voting through e-voting and all your transactions with the government, and further is allowing for the legal signing of contracts online through this card, and they're even trying to regulate the authentication of online comments using this true identity card.
And so you will have what is called an EID, and they've already rolled this out in several EU states. Belgium's got one, but no one has taken it to the level of Estonia, and you'll see it right there. You'll notice that chip. They're getting all of us used to having this chip right now. They put it in all of everyone's bank cards. They've switched everybody over in North America to the chip system, and that's part of the transition into having this national identity card that's really just going to be your only card for everything. They have linked everything together in one place.
To kick it off tonight, we're going to go to Luke Rudowski, right, Tony?
Yeah, you got it.
All right, let's go to Luke. Wearechange.org, bestpoliticaltshirts.com. He's going to give us a little summary, and from there, we're going to dig into the past week's news, dissect it, do some deep dives, get some context around the actual evidence. We'll be right back.
Here's my first thought is I'm not going nowhere to fight none of these wars for these politicians. I'm staying at home, and when the war comes to Arkansas, I will dig my boots in the ground and I will die for everything I love. And I will fight for the people that I love, for the land that I love, and the way of life that I love. There's been so much political corruption in that area. You got Biden and his son making a ton of money off of and using our tax dollars to bribe their people. That's treasonous in my opinion. So you got Hunter Biden and his son using our tax dollars. Hey, if Ukrainian government, if you don't do this, we're taking your tax dollars. He shouldn't be giving our tax dollars to that country anyway. We got veterans out here sleeping on the street, and you're going to give our freaking tax dollars to these Ukrainians and all. Brother, I don't know what's going on over there, but I'm not going over there and fighting, and God bless anybody that's over there that's fighting, and I hope that it just gets solved. And man, I don't like war. You know what I mean? I don't want people dying.
I think it's fair to say that what he is saying, a lot of people are thinking. That, of course, is Bryce Mitchell, who now is 15-0 after a spectacular performance in yesterday's UFC pay-per-view event.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions. We can get into the show, we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.